There are mistakes that men make out of malice, and there are mistakes men make out of loneliness. In the desolate, sun-bleached territory of Dustwater, Arizona, in the year of our Lord 1884, Arthur Penny was about to make a mistake that would shake the earth. Literally. Arthur was not built for the West. The West demands grit, callous, and a spine made of hickory. Arthur Penny was made of parchment, paper, and ink. He was a man of 40 winters. Those coughing fits made him sound 60. He wore spectacles that were constantly sliding down a nose too thin to hold them. And his hands were his tragedy. Long, slender, elegant fingers meant for the ivory keys of a piano, now forced to hold reins and shovels that blistered his skin raw. He stood on the wooden platform of the Dustwater train station, a structure that leaned precariously to the left, much like Arthur's own fortunes. The heat was a physical weight, pressing down on the brim of his cheap bowler hat. It was noon. The sun did not shine here. It hammered. Arthur checked his pocket watch. The gold plating was peeling off, revealing the cheap brass underneath. 12:04 p.m. The Union Pacific was late. Again, he wiped a bead of sweat from his upper lip and looked around. The town of Dustwater was watching him. They always watched him. To them. Arthur was the piano man, the fool who bought the old Henderson claim thinking he could farm rocky soil that had broken men twice his size. On the porch of the dusty hotel across the street sat Baron Blackwood. The Baron, the man who owned the mines, the water, and the sheriff. Blackwood sat in a wicker chair, sipping iced teas, imported from the mountains at great expense. Just to prove he could, he watched Arthur with the amused expression of a child watching an ant struggle under a crumb. "Waiting for your mail-order salvation, Penny," Blackwood called out. His voice was smooth, cultured, and carried the stench of old money. Arthur flinched, but didn't turn. He clutched a letter in his pocket. The letter from the agency in Baltimore. Candidate 402. Name, age, unknown. Strength, exceptional. Domestic skills, adequate. Note, she is of Iroquois descent. Displaced, a hard worker for a hard land. Arthur hadn't asked for beauty. He knew he couldn't afford beauty. He hadn't asked for love. He knew he didn't deserve love. He had asked for help. Someone to chop the wood he couldn't chop. Someone to carry the water buckets that made his back scream in agony. He needed a partner for survival, nothing more. The ground began to tremble. A low vibration traveled up through the soles of Arthur's worn boots. The train, the locomotive, was a black iron beast, coated in the dust of 1,000 miles. It hissed and groaned as it came to a stop. Passengers stepped off, dusty salesmen, tired cowboys, a few women holding handkerchiefs to their noses to block the smell of the cattle cars. Arthur scanned the faces. He was looking for a woman, perhaps a sturdy farm girl from Ohio, or a widow from the war. The conductor, a man named Biggs, with arms like ham hocks, stepped down. He spotted Arthur inside. There was a sigh of pity. "Mr. Penny?" Biggs shouted over the steam. "Yes." Arthur stepped forward, straightening his coat. Is she in the passenger car?" Biggs shook his head. He pointed a thumb toward the rear of the train, toward the freight cars. The cars used for machinery, livestock, and things that didn't fit in civilized society. "She didn't fit, Mr. Penny. You'll have to sign for her back there." Arthur blinked. Didn't fit. He walked past the passenger cars, past the luggage. The townspeople began to drift closer. Since seen, a spectacle. Baron Blackwood stood up from his chair and walked to the edge of the porch, sensing entertainment. Arthur reached the heavy sliding door of the freight car. It was barred from the outside. "Stand back," Biggs warned. Biggs lifted the heavy iron latch and threw the door open. The sun flooded into the dark cavern of the train car. Dust motes danced in the sudden light. For a moment, Arthur saw nothing. Then he heard a sound. A boot hitting the floorboards. Thud. It sounded like a dropped anvil. A figure emerged from the shadows. Arthur Penny stopped breathing. She was not a woman. She was a monument carved from red clay and granite. Kaniehtiio stepped into the light. She had to duck her head to clear the door frame of the train car. When she stood to her full height on the platform, she blocked out the sun. She was easily 6 feet and 7 inches tall, perhaps more in her boots. Her shoulders were broader than the conductor's. Her arms, exposed by a sleeveless tunic made of rough buckskin and cotton, were thick cords of muscle, mapped with blue tribal tattoos that spiraled from her wrists up to her neck. Her hair was a black waterfall, thick and wild, braided with strips of leather, but it was her face that froze Arthur's heart. It was a face of striking, terrifying geometry. High cheekbones sharp enough to cut glass, eyes the color of dark amber, set deep. Watching the world with a mixture of exhaustion and dangerous alert, she stood there, towering over Arthur. He came up to her. Ribcage. The silence in Dustwater stretched for 10 agonizing seconds. Then, a chuckle broke it. It was Baron Blackwood. Good God. The Baron laughed, his voice echoing in the dry air. Penny didn't buy a wife. She bought a draft horse. The town erupted. Laughter. Harsh, cruel, jagged laughter. Hey Arthur, don't let her step on you. Does she come with a saddle? Careful, she might eat your winter supplies in one day. Arthur Penny felt the humiliation burn his face like acid. He wanted to vanish. He wanted the earth to open up and swallow him whole. He looked at Kaniehtiio, expecting to see shame, expecting to see her cry. She did not cry. She did not shrink. Slowly, Kaniehtiio turned her head. She looked at the Baron. She didn't glare. She simply looked at him the way a wolf looks at a noisy cricket. The sheer weight of her indifference silenced the Baron's laughter mid-throat. Then she looked down at Arthur. Arthur trembled. He took off his hat, revealing his thinning hair. Mrs. Penny, he stammered, his voice barely a whisper. Kaniehtiio, she said. Her voice was tectonic, deep, resonant, vibrating in Arthur's chest. It wasn't loud, but it carried power. The paper says, Penny? You are Penny? Yes, I am Arthur. She nodded once. Efficient. Where are the bags? Arthur pointed vaguely to the cargo hold. I have a wagon, but I have a piano coming too. I'll need 2 hire men to load. Kaniehtiio walked past him. The boardwalk groaned under her weight. Creak. Groan. She walked to the cargo pile. There it was, an upright piano, crated in wood. Heavy cast, iron frame. It took 4 men to load it in St. Louis. Kaniehtiio looked at the crate. She tested the weight with one hand. Then, she squatted. The muscles in her legs bunched under her dress like shifting rocks. She wrapped her arms around the crate. She grunted a short, sharp exhale. She lifted the piano. She lifted the 400-pound instrument off the ground, balanced it against her chest, and walked toward Arthur's wagon. The laughter in the town died instantly. Jaws dropped. A cigar fell from a man's mouth. Even the horses seemed to step back nervously. She reached the wagon, a rickety thing that Arthur used for groceries. She set the piano down in the bed of the wagon. The wagon springs screamed in protest, bottoming out. She turned to Arthur, wiping a smudge of dust from her shoulder. We go now, she said. Arthur couldn't move. He couldn't speak. A just nodded, scrambled up into the driver's seat like a frightened child, and snapped the reins. As they rode out of town, Arthur didn't look back, but he could feel the eyes of every man, woman, and child boring into his back, and he could feel the massive, silent presence sitting next to him, displacing the air, making the wagon tilt dangerously to the right. The journey to the ranch took an hour. It was the longest hour of Arthur's life. They sat side by side, yet worlds apart. Arthur, clutching the reins with white knuckles, trying to make himself smaller. Kaniehtiio, sitting with perfect posture, her hands resting on her niece's hands that were twice the size of Arthur's eye. Arthur started, then cleared his throat. The sound was pathetic in the vast desert silence. I made a stew. For dinner. It's It's just beans and salt pork. I hope that is acceptable. Kaniehtiio stared at the horizon. Good. That's good. Arthur bit his lip. The house, it's small. I didn't expect... the agency description was vague. They said I was big, Kaniehtiio said. She didn't look at him. Tay told you. Exceptional strength. That is the polite word for freak. Arthur flinched. No. I wouldn't use that word. The world uses it, she replied. My own people used it. Te Kayedme. The iron pine. Too tall for a woman. Too strong for a wife. Men want flowers, Mr. Penny. They do not want trees. She turned to him then. Her amber eyes drilled into him. Why did you buy me? You are small. You look like you break if the wind blows. Why bring a giant into your house? Arthur looked at his own hands, the hands that failed him every day on the ranch. Because, Arthur whispered, I am tired of breaking. I didn't want a flower, Kaniehtiio. Flowers die in this dirt. I suppose I needed a tree. Someone who could stand when I fall. She studied him. For a moment, the hardness in her face soft. Just a fraction. She saw the honesty in his fear. I will chop the wood, she said. I will carry the water. And Arthur offered. I will play the piano. If you like music. She snorted softly. Music does not fill the belly. They arrived at the ranch. It was a sad affair. A small wooden cabin with a leaning porch. A barn that had seen better days. And a fence line that was falling down in 3 places. The desert was reclaiming it. Kaniehtiio climbed down. She looked at the shack. There leaks, she stated, pointing to the roof. Yes, Arthur admitted. The fence is weak. Yes. The horse is hungry. She didn't wait for his admission. She walked to the back of the wagon, unloaded her small trunk with one hand, and then unloaded the piano with the other, carrying it to the porch as if it were a box of apples. That night, the reality of their arrangement became physical. The cabin had 1 room, 1 bed, a narrow iron frame that Arthur had slept in alone for 5 years. Arthur stood by the fireplace, stirring the beans. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. You take the bed, Arthur said quickly. I have blankets. I'll sleep in the barn loft. It's comfortable. The hay is fresh. Kaniehtiio looked at the small bed, then she looked at Arthur. You are the husband, she said. The husband sleeps in the bed. I am a gentleman, Arthur corrected, though his voice shook. And you are the guest, until you feel otherwise. I will not. I do not expect. He turned red. I expect nothing from you, Kaniehtiio. Only your help with the work. Your honor is safe with me. She looked at him with genuine curiosity. This little man, who smelled of old paper and lavender soap, who trembled when she moved, was offering her the only comfort in the house. The bed will break, she said flatly. I'll reinforce it tomorrow, Arthur promised. I sleep on the floor, she decided. She took the blankets from his hand. She laid them out on the rug by the fire. The floor is strong. The floor does not judge. Arthur didn't argue. He ate his beans in silence. She ate hers, 3 full bowls with the efficiency of a soldier. After dinner, Arthur sat at the piano she had placed in the corner. It was out of tune, battered by the journey, but Arthur needed it. He needed to escape the awkwardness. He lifted the cover. He placed his long, thin fingers on the keys. He began to play. It wasn't a cowboy tune. It was Beethoven. The music filled the small, dusty cabin. It was complex, melancholic, and utterly beautiful. It was the voice Arthur didn't have. Kaniehtiio had been cleaning her boots. She stopped. She turned her head. She watched his hands. Hands that couldn't hold a shovel, flying across the ivory like birds. She had never heard music like this. The drums of her tribe were the heartbeat of the earth. This was the crying of the soul. For 20 minutes, The giant woman sat motionless on the floor, listening to the small man play. When he finished, the silence returned. But it wasn't the same silence as before. It was softer. "You have strong hands," she said from the dark corner. Arthur looked at his frail fingers and laughed bitterly. These are useless twigs." "No," Kaniehtiio said. She lay down and pulled the blanket over her shoulder. "They ispik, that is strength." Arthur slept in the chair that night. For the first time in years, he didn't feel terrified of the vast, empty darkness outside his window, because inside, occupying half the floor, was a mountain that breathed. 2 weeks passed. The rhythm of the ranch changed. Arthur woke up one morning to a sound he didn't recognize. Thud, thud, thud. He looked out the window. Kaniehtiio was in the yard. She was repairing the fence. She didn't use a hammer. She was taking the heavy cedar posts, lifting them like toothpicks, and driving them into the hard earth with the sheer force of her shoulders. She was doing a week's worth of work before breakfast. Arthur walked out with 2 cups of coffee. He felt useless, but he also felt relief. "Coffee," he offered. She took the cup. Her hand engulfed it. "The fence is done," she said. "I will clear the south field today. The rocks are too many." "Connie, those rocks are granite boulders. I've been trying to blast them for 3 years. I do not need dynamite," she said. "I need a lever." They were an odd pair. The town of Dustwater whispered about them. Te Kajid, the beast, and him the pet. But the real trouble began when they had to go back to town. Supplies were low. They hitched the wagon. Dustwater was busy. It was Saturday. Miners, ranchers, and gamblers filled the streets. As Arthur parked the wagon in front of the general store, the atmosphere shifted. Conversations stopped. Eyes turned. Baron Blackwood was there. Of course he was. He stood with his lieutenants. 3 men known as the Wolf Brothers. They were big men, mean men, hired to break strikes and break bones. Arthur stepped down. He offered a hand to Kaniehtiio. She ignored it and stepped down, the ground puffing dust around her boots. They walked toward the store. Blackwood stepped in front of him. Well, Blackwood smirked, twirling his silk walking stick. "The circus is back in town. How is the animal training going? Penny, have you taught her to sit yet?" Arthur stopped. His face went pale. "Let us pass, Blackwood." "I don't think I will," Blackwood said. He looked up at Kaniehtiio. He had to look way up. "You know, bigger, I have an ox that died yesterday. I have an opening in my plow team. The pay is hay and a bucket of water." The Wolf Brothers laughed. A crude, ugly sound. Arthur felt a surge of rage he didn't know he possessed. "She is my wife," he shouted. His voice cracked. "You will treat her with respect." Blackwood's smile vanished. "Respect for a savage? For a freak of nature?" He raised his walking stick. "And you, Penny, you're an embarrassment to white men everywhere." Blackwood swung the stick. It was a vicious, calculated blow meant to humiliate. The heavy silver knob of the stick struck Arthur across the cheekbone. Crack! Arthur crumbled. His glasses flew off. He hit the dirt, blood instantly blinding his left eye. He gasped, curling into a ball. "Now," Blackwood sneered, looming over him, "kiss my boot and apologize for polluting my town." The world seemed to slow down. Kaniehtiio stood like a statue. She looked at Arthur, bleeding in the dust. She looked at the Baron. She remembered her father's words. "Do not show your strength, daughter. It scares them. Be small, be quiet." She looked at Arthur again. The only man who had offered her a home. The man who played music for her. "Be quiet." "No. Not today." Kaniehtiio moved. It wasn't the movement of a human. It was the strike of a grizzly bear. One of the Wolf Brothers, a man named Pike who weighed 250 pounds, tried to grab her arm. Kaniehtiio didn't even turn. She simply backhanded him. WHAM. Pike's feet left the ground. He flew 6 feet through the air and crashed through the storefront window of the general store. Glass exploded outward in a glittering shower. Silence. Absolute, horrified silence. The second brother drew a knife. Kaniehtiio caught his wrist. You could hear the bones grind together. She twisted. He screamed. She forced him down to his knees, effortlessly, as if he were made of straw. She took the knife from his hand and snapped the blade in half with her thumb and forefinger. Pink! She dropped a broken metal and looked at the Baron. Blackwood was backing away, his face pale as milk. Stay back. I'm the Baron. I own this town. Kaniehtiio stepped over Arthur's body. She loomed over Blackwood. Her shadow swallowed him. She reached out and grabbed him by the lapels of his expensive Italian suit. She lifted him. She lifted him until his polished boots were dangling at her eye level. He kicked and flailed, shouting threats. But he was helpless. A child in the grip of a titan. You own the dirt, Kaniehtiio rumbled, her voice vibrating through Blackwood's chest bones. But you do not own the air, and you do not own him. She didn't hit him. She didn't need to. She simply opened her hands and let him drop. He hit the ground hard, gasping for breath, his dignity shattered in front of the entire town. Kaniehtiio turned. She knelt beside Arthur. Her touch, so violent a second ago, was now incredibly gentle. She picked up his broken glasses. She wiped the blood from his cheek with her thumb. Can you stand, husband? She asked softly. Arthur looked up at her. He saw the fire in her eyes. He saw the protector. With you, Arthur whispered, I can fly. She scooped him up into her arms, carrying him like a bride, and walked back to the wagon. The crowd parted like the Red Sea. No one said a word. No one laughed. Because you do not laugh at a storm. You just pray. It passes you by. The road back to the Penny Ranch was not silent like the first one. But words were not spoken. The language between them had changed. It was no longer the awkward silence of strangers. It was the heavy, electrically charged silence of a Arthur sat on the wagon bench, pressing a cold rag to his swollen cheek. His head throbbed in time with the horse's hooves, but his mind was crystal clear. For the first time in his life, the fog of fear had lifted. He looked at Kaniehtiio's hands holding the reins. Those massive, scarred hands that had just tossed grown men like bundles of dry hay. They will come tonight, Arthur said. His voice didn't shake. It surprised him. Kaniehtiio didn't look at him. She kept her eyes on the darkening horizon. Yes. The man in the fine suit. His pride is broken. A man like that would burn the world to hide his shame. We should keep going, Arthur suggested. Test in the idea? We could pack the wagon. Head to California. Leave the land. Kaniehtiio pulled the reins, stopping the wagon in the middle of the desolate road. She turned her amber eyes to him. Do you want to run, Arthur Penny? Is that the song you want to play for the rest of your life? Arthur looked at the ranch in the distance, his father's ranch. The place where he had failed, and failed, and failed. But it was his. No, Arthur whispered. I am tired of running. My legs are too short for it. A faint, almost invisible smile touched Kaniehtiio's lips. Good, because I am tired of walking. They arrived at the cabin as the sun began to bleed into the western hills, turning the sky a bruised purple. The atmosphere was heavy. The birds had stopped singing. The insects were silent. Nature knew what was coming. Preparation began immediately. It wasn't the frantic panic of prey. It was the methodical preparation of predators. Kaniehtiio went to the barn. She didn't look for guns. She looked for iron. She found a heavy logging chain, rusted but solid. She found the splitting mull, the heavy sledgehammer with a wedge blade she used for giant oak logs. She weighed it in her hand. It looked like a toy in her grip. Arthur went inside. He opened the cedar chest at the foot of his bed. He moved aside the sheet music batch. Mozart, Lestand, pulled out the false bottom. There, wrapped in oilcloth, was a double-barreled 10-gauge shotgun, a couch gun. He hadn't fired it in 6 years. He broke the breech. It smelled of gun oil and old violence. He found a box of brass shells. He sat at the kitchen table, cleaning the firing pins. Kaniehtiio entered. She had to duck through the doorframe. She saw the gun. "You know how to use that?" she asked. "Point and pull," Arthur said. "It's not as hard as a concerto." She sat opposite him. She took a whetstone and began to sharpen the edge of the splitting maul. The sound was rhythmic, hypnotic. "Tonight," she said softly, "you stay behind me. Kaniehtiio. You are the shooter. Do not let them flank us." "Connie." Arthur reached out. His small, pale hand covered her massive, dark knuckles. "Why? You could leave. You owe me nothing. I bought a contract, not a bodyguard." She stopped sharpening. She looked at his hand on hers. "You played music for me," she said simply. "And today, in the dust, you tried to stand up for me. No man has ever stood up for the Iron Pine. They only run away." She turned her hand over and squeezed his fingers gently. "I do not fight for the contract, Arthur. I fight for the husband." Arthur felt a lump in his throat the size of a fist. He nodded. Outside, the last light of day vanished. The moon was hidden behind thick clouds. The darkness was total. And then, the dogs began to bark. Baron Blackwood did not come alone, and he did not come with the local drunks this time. He sent the night riders. Mercenaries from the border. Men who killed for money and slept like babies. There were 12 of them. They surrounded the cabin in a loose circle, torches unlit, moving by starlight. Inside, Arthur blew out the oil lamp. The cabin plunged into blackness. "There at the fence line," Kaniehtiio whispered. Her hearing was supernatural. 12 horses. Heavy boats. "Burn it out," a voice shouted from the darkness. It wasn't Blackwood. It was a hired killer's voice graveling glass. A torch flared to life in the yard. Then another. Then for more. The light danced wildly on the walls of the cabin. Crash. A bottle of kerosene with a burning rag smashed through the front window. It hit the rug. Fire bloomed instantly, hungry and bright. "The bucket!" Arthur shouted. He grabbed the water pail, but Kaniehtiio stopped him. "Leave it," she commanded. "The smoke will hide us." She moved to the door. She didn't open it. She waited. "Come out, little piano man," the voice taunted. "Send out the beast, and we'll make it quick." Kaniehtiio looked at Arthur. She nodded. Arthur raised the shotgun. He aimed not at the men, but at the burning window frame. Boom! The blast blew the burning wood outward, creating a cloud of sparks and smoke in the yard. "Now?" Kaniehtiio roared. She didn't use the door. She charged the wall. The front wall of the cabin was old. Dry pine. Kaniehtiio hit it with her shoulder like a battering ram. CRAC kaboom. Wood splintered and flew. She smashed right through the wall of the house, exploding into the yard in a shower of debris and dust. The mercenaries were stunned. They expected a scared couple coming out with hands up. They got a landslide. Kaniehtiio swung the chain she had wrapped around her left arm. It whipped through the air with a sound like a tearing sheet. The heavy iron link struck the nearest rider in the chest. He was swept off his horse, as if hit by a cannonball. "Fire! Kill it!" Someone screamed. Gunshots erupted. Bang. Zing. Bullets tore into the dirt, into the cabin. One grazed Kaniehtiio's arm, but she didn't slow down. The adrenaline of battle turned her into something ancient and terrifying. She wielded the splitting maul in her right hand. She swung it at a horse's flank not to kill, but to scare. The horse reared, throwing its rider. The rider scrambled up, drawing a knife. Kaniehtiio grabbed him by the belt and the collar. She lifted him overhead and threw him into another rider. It was chaos. It was primal. Arthur stepped out through the hole in the wall. He was terrified. His heart was hammering a frantic rhythm against his ribs. He saw a man aiming a Winchester rifle at Kaniehtiio's back. Arthur didn't think. He didn't calculate. He leveled the 10 gauge. Boom. The second barrel fired. The mercenary dropped his rifle, clutching his leg, screaming. Arthur. Left. Left. Kaniehtiio shouted. 2 men were rushing Arthur with clubs. He fumbled to reload. His hands were shaking. He dropped a shell. Damn it, he cried. The first man raised his club. Suddenly, a shadow eclipsed the firelight. Kaniehtiio was there. She had covered 20 feet in 2 seconds. She didn't have her hammer anymore. She used her body. She tackled the 2 men like a linebacker. The impact shook the ground. Zestuda breathing heavily, blood trickling down her arm. 6 men were down. The others were circling, wary, terrified. Their horses were spooked, refusing to charge the giant woman. Then, Baron Blackwood emerged from the shadows on his white stallion. He held a long-barreled revolver. He aimed it squarely at Arthur, who was reloading on his knees. Enough of this pantomime, Blackwood snarled. Kaniehtiio was 10 feet away. Too far to reach him before he pulled the trigger. No, she screamed. Arthur snapped the shotgun closed. He looked up. He looked right down the barrel of Blackwood's gun, and in that moment, Arthur Penny stopped being the piano man. He didn't fire at Blackwood. He fired at the ground in front of the white stallion. Kaboom! The dirt exploded. Stallion, blinded by the flash and deafened by the noise, panicked. It reared up. Completely vertical. Blackwood, the aristocrat, who prided himself on control, lost it. He slipped from the saddle. His boot caught in the stirrup. The horse bolted. Blackwood was dragged. He screamed as he was pulled through the fire, through the cactus, through the debris of the battle. The remaining mercenaries looked at the giant woman, dripping blood and holding a chain. They looked at the small man with the smoking shotgun. They looked at their boss being dragged into the dark. They made a business decision. They turned their horses and rode away. Fast. The yard was a ruin. The front of the cabin was gone. The smell of gunpowder and burnt wood hung thick in the air. Kaniehtiio stood in the center of the yard, chest heaving. She dropped the chain. It hit the ground with a heavy metallic clatter. She swayed. Connie! Arthur scrambled to his feet. Erantoer! She sank to her knees. The adrenaline was fading, and the pain was rushing in. She had a bullet graze on her shoulder and a deep cut on her arm from a knife. Arthur fell to his knees beside her. He looked tiny next to her. You're bleeding, he panicked. I need whiskey. I need thread. Arthur, she rasped. She reached out and grabbed his coat. Are you hurt? Me? No. I'm fine. Tears streamed down his dusty face. You fought an army, Gunny. You fought an army for me. She smiled. It was a genuine smile this time, showing teeth that were white and strong. We fought an army. Husband. You shot the horse. That was... Loud Arthur laughed. A hysterical, relieved laugh. It was very loud. He helped her stand. It took all his strength just to support her arm. They walked into the ruined cabin. The piano was untouched in the corner, miraculously safe from the fire that had consumed the curtains. Arthur sat her down on the only chair. He found the medical kit. He cleaned her wounds with whiskey. She didn't flinch, not once. When he stitched her arm, she watched his hands. Steady, she whispered. Piano hands. Yes, Arthur said, focusing intensely. Piano hands. The next morning, the sheriff finally came. He saw the bodies of the mercenaries who were groaning, broken, but alive. Kaniehtiio hadn't killed them. She had simply dismantled them. He saw the tracks of the Baron's horse. Blackwood was found 3 miles away, bruised, battered, with a broken leg and a spirit broken beyond repair. He sold the mine a week later and moved back east. He couldn't look anyone in the eye. The sheriff looked at the hole in the cabin wall. He looked at Arthur, who was sweeping the porch. He looked at Kaniehtiio, who was bandaged but moving a heavy beam to repair the roof. "What happened here?" "Penny?" the sheriff asked, tipping his hat. Arthur stopped sweeping. He adjusted his glasses, which were cracked but functional. "A structural disagreement, Sheriff," Arthur said calmly. "We decided to remodel." The sheriff looked at Kaniehtiio. She stopped working and looked down at him. The sheriff gulped. "Right?" the sheriff said. "Looks sturdy. Good day." Time moves differently in the Legends of the West. Dustwater changed. The mines eventually dried up, but the town survived. It survived because of the Penny Ranch. Arthur and Kaniehtiio never left. They rebuilt the cabin. They made it bigger. They had to. Kaniehtiio needed high ceilings. They didn't have children in the traditional sense, but they adopted every stray, every outcast, every mistake that got off the train in Dustwater. Arthur taught them to read and play music. Kaniehtiio taught them to work and to fight. They became the strange, beating heart of the territory. Travelers passing through would often stop their wagons at the edge of the Penny property just to listen. If the wind was right, you could hear a duet, the delicate, intricate, cascading notes of a grand piano, accompanied by the heavy, earth-shaking rhythm of a hammer striking iron. The porcelain and the iron, the flower and the tree. Arthur Penny lived to be 80 years old. When he finally passed, they say Kaniehtiio didn't cry. She simply picked him up in her arms one last time, carried him to the top of the highest hill, and buried him beneath a young pine tree. She lived another 10 years, guarding that hill. And to this day, in the saloons of Arizona, when men brag about strong wives and hard fights, the old-timers just shake their heads and say, "Son, you didn't know the Titan of Dustwater. She could catch a bullet with her teeth, but she loved a small man with gentle hands, and that was the strongest thing about her."